Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hello. We're just waiting a wee while to let some more people join before we get started.
Okay.
We're waiting for all three of them to join.
Every person counts. Okay. It's going up by the second, so.
Yeah, we'll give them a few minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Get the coffee cups filled. At 7:30, there'll be a mass exodus, of course, when Corey comes on.
No, better get the recording set. Okay. I think we'll get started then. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the third event of our Bloody Ringwood calendar to celebrate the launch of Simon Mclean's brilliant memoir, The 10%, the book that promises to tell the truth, the whole truth, and something like the truth about his many years as a police officer and detective. We've got a fully packed schedule for this evening, so I'm going to go over that briefly before handing you over to Simon himself. We'll start with a look at the early years of Simon Mclean with his siblings, Jane and Dermot, and his best friend Stan, before jumping into the first reading from the book. We'll then welcome Ian Andrews, Simon's police mentor and colleague from his rookie years, followed by best-selling author Melinda Colt, who'll talk with Simon about how he became a crime consultant on her novel. The winner of our giveaway will also be announced at this point. Then we have Robert Beedham, award-winning film producer and writer, who will join us for a chat before Simon moves on to his second reading from the book. Next up, it's a Q&A session with Simon, so if you have any questions throughout the launch, you can pop them in the Q&A box you'll see at the bottom of your screen, or if you're watching over on Facebook Live, you can simply comment on the live stream there. It might not be possible to get through every question, but we will try our best. As we come to the end of tonight's event, we have a very special segment from Susan and Daisy of the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, a charity that's very close to Simon's heart, to tell us about the vital work that they do. Sandy Jameson, CEO of Ringwood and friend of Simon, will then say a few words before we finish with a beautiful dedication by Simon. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't grabbed yourself a copy of the 10% yet, you can find it at ringwoodpublishing.com. Just go to our bookshop's forthcoming fiction section. If you're watching on Facebook, the link is in the description. We are experiencing some delays with the ebook due to Amazon being flooded with new titles this year, but we'll be sure to announce it all over our social media channels as soon as it's released. Without further ado, let me hand you over to the very capable hands of Simon Mclean. Take it away, Simon.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you very much. And Ruth, I'll thank you just now, just in case. In fact, I'll thank everyone who needs thanked, because I'll probably forget later on. So that's that covered, okay? Welcome to everyone who's attending, and especially those of you who have bought the 10%, and all the people that have clocked on here by mistake, just hang about and you might enjoy it anyway. Thanks for buying the book purely on faith. And it's amazing the amount of people that have said to me, oh, it's really big, isn't it? I really don't know what they were expecting, whether they're expecting a 2 or 3 pager or something, but it is what it is. Firstly, it's a shame we can't all be together tonight because of the restrictions, but it is what it is. Normally we would be doing this in a hotel or in some arena, probably, the Scottish Exhibition Centre or something like that. But the upside of that is that it's probably saved me a fortune in drinks. So we'll make the best of what we have. And I should say right away that Ruth has put together a fantastic gathering, global gathering, I might add. We have Romania, we have Australia and Americans on, and we also have Rossi. So there you go. A very special thanks to a group of people who've been totally forgotten about so far. And they always seem to miss out on the big occasions and the big celebrations. And to be honest, without them, none of this would have been possible whatsoever. So can I say a special thanks to all the Neds, thieves, dealers, fraudsters out there who really have helped me get here. I owe you one, lads. Thank you. They'll all be huddled around a telly watching this together, of course, hopefully. As Ruth says, her team have put together a global night tonight, but just a wee word of housekeeping. With regards to the supplies of the book, I think Ruth's already touched on that, but it's worth reiterating that the ebook is complete and Ringwood have done their bit. It's all there. And it's just simply a matter of Amazon's backlog just now and them getting round to it. The Cuddy Strip last week took 12 days to get onto Amazon, another brilliant Ringwood publication. So we just have to bear with that until it's ready. And finally, to the few solicitors that I know have tuned in tonight that I've had many dealings with over the years, a special shout out to them because again, they've contributed greatly to my career. And I just have two words really to say to them, and that is no comment. I had to get them back for that, Ruth. The main joy of doing this book has been surprising because it's been the fact that I've reconnected with so many of my former colleagues. Most of them wanting to know what I've said about them in the book, of course. But it's been great. Some of them I haven't seen or spoken to for 40 years, and it's great to learn what they're up to now and how the years have treated them. Sadly, also learning about the ones that are no longer with us. But to the guys who I did work with and who have stayed up late, especially to come on here, I can really only say, thank you. We won't keep you up too late tonight. That's especially for them. Now, the book itself begins with a disclaimer, I suppose, when I talk about how we all remember things differently. And I hopefully gave a few examples of that. And since I've written that, I've heard so many examples of it again and again. But we all see life through our own perspective and through our own lens. And to prove that this is true, I'm going to have my first three guests on over the next few minutes. The first of them being the person in the world that's known me the longest time because he's my big brother. And he'll definitely demonstrate how none of us remember the thing the same way. It's always the truth or something like the truth and very seldom the whole truth. So I'm going to introduce my big brother Dermot, and I'm going to just point out to him, ask him if he's got any insights into my early years and any clues about the future that awaited me in the police.
Well, with the benefit of, thank you for that, Simon. With the benefit of hindsight, it's all there, of course. You were always going to do something out of the ordinary and something that mixed naughtiness with adventure and danger. The big surprise was what you chose. And if anyone had asked you as a wee boy, what do you want to be? There was no question of what you wanted to be. A footballer. That was a footballer. That was it.
Yeah.
And
closely followed by a painter.
A painter. I don't remember that one. That's an interesting point. And I remember I was not very interested in football, and that's another story, but you were. And you were very insistent on the rules, which I didn't know there were any rules. I thought it was just a ball, you kicked it to each other and you ran around. And you were only 4 or 5 and you said to me, how do you know who's won if you don't have any rules?
Yeah. And
you say, there's the policeman right there in his wee uniform. And somewhere in there, it's all going on, isn't it? Needless to say, I never learnt the rules. I just pretended to and kicked the ball about anyway. But there you were, insisting.
The starkest contrast I can remember there was not just with football, Dermot, but any sport, because you and I played tennis and we played, and for some reason, winning was all that mattered to me, and you were completely ambivalent about it. So at any minute you could say, I'm going away home for my dinner now. And I was absolutely infuriated, time and time again, because you didn't care who won.
I still remember that. I can still feel it. But the other thing I remember is you were great at telling stories.
Mm.
And the one that comes to mind is, where have you been? Oh, I was at Stan. Mom going, oh, Stan. I was at Stan's and his mum got ill and we had to look after her. And that's why I was late, Mum. Sorry. It's so convincing. I believed it.
What, are you implying that it was not true?
Well,
wait a minute.
The truth, and then there's the truth.
We need some perspective here, and I know somebody that will back me up here. My wee sister will back me up because you've obviously, your memory's gone completely, brother. Can we bring can you show a wee picture here, Katie, of Dermot and I with our mum? I thought Dermot would like to see it if it's available there. Is it?
Yeah, just give her a little minute. We've also got Stan has joined us now.
Yep.
That Dermot just mentioned.
Hi there.
His sister will be here somewhere.
Hi, Stan.
There's Mum.
There we go.
Now, even at that age, he was bullying me. That was meant to be a picture of me and my mum, and he inserted himself there. What does he call it? Bombed his way into it. That's a cracking photo, though. I'm the one in the middle, by the way. Thanks, Katie. Is my wee sister there to back me up? Because she must have known. She is. You must have known that I was going to be a policeman. It must have been obvious to you, the way I looked after you.
I'm just looking at that photograph and thinking it's the only one I've seen with Dermot's not crying for ages.
Only one you'll ever see.
It's always a greeting face, Wayne. Well, I think we have to, the perspective in this one is that I'm much, much younger than both of you.
Well, a wee bit.
So my memory isn't so much of you loving football, but of you chasing women and using me as your beanbag to push upon.
I take it this isn't live, Ruth. I take it this is a recording that we can edit later on.
Yeah, this is just the came in, you suppose the police
I think the time I remember you most was as a teenager, and yet the stories were definitely there. The football had cut down a bit, the music had come in, motorbikes, long hair, and 1970s fashion. And my memory of you is mostly making me listen to music through headphones that I didn't understand, and me wanting to listen to Jimmy Osmond and you not being that approving.
So your musical taste now is pretty much, I bet you thank me now for that, Jane.
Oh yeah, I was listening to Dark Side of the Moon recently, thinking of you.
Katie, you got the picture of Jane and her family. Jane now lives in Brisbane, Ruth, with her family. So it's just coming into summer over there, which is a bit galling. In fact, is it daylight yet, Jane? Nearly?
Not quite. It's nearly daylight. It's only 4:10 in the morning. Thanks. 5 o'clock we get daylight.
It's maybe a good point to bring Stan in at this stage, because I'm quite sure he will back me up. Family never back you up, do they? One of the mistakes I made while I was writing the book was to send a chapter to my brother and sister and my son. So to any aspiring authors out there, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is don't share it with anyone, especially family.
I never commented. I never said.
I don't think you read it. I don't think you read it.
I'm waiting for the book for a surprise.
Did you hear that, Ruth? I never commented. How does that make you feel when you send your sister a chapter of your work in progress and you get nothing? Nothing.
Not enough good stories about her in there, that's why. Too much focus on the police work and not enough on your amazing sister.
Where's Stan? Has he disappeared?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, he's there.
What did
Stan, you backed me up here. By the time I met you when I was 9 or 10, I was ready for the police force even then, I think, wasn't I?
I think you were certainly ready for the police. I mean, my recollection of those times was that we were always naughty, but we were never really bad.
Yeah.
And the stories are sort of pretty repeatable, I think, most of them.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Do you remember when we stole somebody's bench out their garden and put it at the bus stop for people? I
think you're getting me mixed up with somebody else.
It It was always naughty, but never bad.
Yeah, and we were ahead of our times because they now have benches in the bus shelters now.
Yes, indeed.
That would be a defence 40 years later. I also remember that night the police being involved, and they caught 4 of us, whereas they were looking for 5 because George had decided to go home. And whilst we were being interviewed and the police were trying to count us, between them, they were trying to count to 4. George appeared round the corner to see what all the fuss was, and all of a sudden made up the 5 they were looking for. So we were whisked off to the Marine for my first taste of the cells. And then I was never in one after that, thankfully. So far. That's great. That was maybe released today, so it's early. Sorry, Stan.
That was maybe what convinced you to join the police.
Yeah, I think so. I much preferred it looking into the cell than looking out of the cell, put it that way.
Do you remember when we shared a flat in Woodlands Road and you came back there the very first time with your full uniform on?
Mm-hmm.
And I took great pleasure in the first time I'd ever knocked a policeman's hat off.
Yeah, in the middle of the street. You didn't wait until I came in. You ran up the street and knocked it off. I would have arrested you if I'd known how.
Had a good lawyer then, though.
I should say the photograph is Jane on the right with her wife Susan and Maisie in Susan's arms and wee Tom there. That's a couple of years ago, Jane, maybe?
Oh yeah, Tom's grown an awful lot since then.
Yeah. And where is that?
Oh God, a beach in Australia somewhere beautiful.
Well, I knew it wasn't Stevenson anyway.
They all look that good. I think it's in Perth, actually. It was a holiday in Perth, over in Western Australia. Yeah.
Lovely. And I think Katie's got one of Stan and I back in the day. I don't know what we were doing. Oh, there it is. Oh, that was my wedding day, Stan. You were best man.
Look, yeah, I remember Stan with that hair. That's his hair. Where's it gone?
That's coming back in again. I was in India a few years ago and that haircut's still quite fashionable, Stan.
I would settle for that haircut on the
basis. Well, we would love to chat with you 3 all day, and I'm sure you have plenty more to say, but sadly time is getting on, and I think we should perhaps say our goodbyes and move on to the first reading.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, just turn the just turn the volume off on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Simon, would you like to tell us a bit about the reading you're about to do?
Sure. The thing I was hoping to speak to my family and friend about there was getting to be an undercover, because really that's the underlying theme of the book, and it's certainly what all of the media outlets have picked up on. Yeah. So the reading that I've picked is really about when I discovered that I was cut out for that kind of work, and seemed to be quite tuned into it. So I'm going to do a wee reading from the book, and it's called The Mantra, strangely enough. Okay, this is the mantra. What a name for a pub. I had never heard of it until I was sent to Oban to work undercover for a week. I was 24, a newly appointed detective, and excited to get away at the job's expense. I'm not sure who came up with the idea, but it was very unusual in those days in Argyll, and I certainly wasn't complaining. The mission was to go to Soraba House in Oban on the Monday, and there I was to meet a guy, Tam, who was a DC from Dumbarton, and about the same age as me. We were to spend the week drinking in the Mantrap pub, right in the town centre of Oban, and our job was to monitor any activity involving drugs. We would update the gaffers daily, and things would proceed from there. Nae bother. We were purporting to be electricians that were working on a job somewhere in Oban. I certainly don't remember the details now, but we were dressed appropriately, and we would go into the Mantrap about tea time. We were there about 5:30 that first day, suitably thirsty after a hard day's electricianing. Tam and I got on fine, and socialising wasn't any problem for us at all. The man trap had a pool table, and it certainly served its purpose that week. I've always had a problem with pool tables. Under normal circumstances, you buy a pint and you decide to have a game of pool. And usually before you finish your pint, someone has put money up on the table, indicating that they want to play the winner of the game. Sometimes there can be 5 or 6 people in that queue. Then when you either get beat or you win, the chances of you having finished your pint are very slim. And so you or your mate continue to play. Remember that one of you has put your money back up in the queue and a refill is required shortly thereafter. This process can very easily lead to last orders, missed dinners, late nights, and serious domestic disputes. I know that from very hard experience. Tam and I didn't have any such concerns or constraints, as our remit was to be in the pub as much as possible. So we played pool and blethered with the locals happily. Our concern was pacing ourselves so that we could still be in the pub come closing time. And so we were deliberately drinking slowly in order that we would still be compos mentis come closing time. This was where we made a rookie mistake that fateful Monday night. To be continued later. You there, Ruth?
I am here. Thank you very much for that reading. Left us on a cliffhanger as well, so we'll have part 2 of that later on. Stay tuned. So,
on you go.
Would you like to introduce our next guest? Ian Andrew, you know him better than I do.
I sure do. This was when I joined the police, I was sent to Campbelltown in Argyll in the Mclean, and I was fresh from the shipyards in Glasgow. Had little direction, if any, in my life, drove a motorbike, and believe me, the police uniform was a very strange thing to me at that time. And I suppose before we even talk, Ian, I need to thank you, because I've not really done it publicly, for looking after me for that first couple of years, because in the police, that's your probationary period, Ruth, when the police can still make a decision and get rid of you very, very easily. Once your probation is finished, it's much more difficult because you're a fully fledged constable then. But those first 2 years, you're a bit fragile and vulnerable. So I have to thank Ian for helping me through that and for everything that he taught me in that time. Welcome aboard, Ian.
Thanking you.
How are you?
I'm good.
You heard the discussion with my useless brother and sister slagging me, and Stan, who obviously had the wrong end of the stick altogether, or had maybe befriended my twin by mistake, I'm not sure. But when I came to Campbelltown, was it obvious that I was going to aspire to great heights at that time?
I do feel a degree of responsibility for how things went from there. When you arrived, I was faced with, shall we say, as gangly youth who, against all odds, seemed to have a way with the women. It was a bit of a travesty as far as a lot of the other young guys were concerned. But the other thing that sticks in my mind is that from a purely personal and selfish point of view was the rest of our shift were quite a degree older than us. And what you did when you arrived was you reduced my requirement to run quite considerably, because it meant that there was actually somebody else that could catch a running Ned as opposed to just me. And you mustn't forget that, I mean, Simon mentioned it had been just about the 2 years. I was only a couple of months out of my probation when Simon arrived. So there wasn't that big a difference between us. There was still a learning process going on with both of us.
Yeah. It's actually amazing what that learning curve is in the first 2 years for a police officer. And it never ceases to amaze me just now, the demographic of the police, because when Ian and I joined, the old school was still there. There were sergeants and cops in their 20-year service and plus, some of them in 30 years plus. So the wealth of experience and knowledge that was there. And I feel sorry, Ian, for the young cops coming in now that don't have that to fall back on largely.
There is a great deal of that. We learned so much from guys who, frankly, were ex-military, a lot of them, because they'd done their national service or they'd fought through the war. And, well, we were replacing a lot of them, of course, guys that had joined from 46 through to 48. that was them. They're 30 years up, so we went to replace them. There was a lot of things went before us, right enough, that were perhaps, you discussed them in the book, but perhaps not so good. But I think we came in at a time when we were able to make our own history for the force.
Yeah, very much so. Something I was thinking about today, in fact, I was talking to someone about it, and I haven't mentioned it to you lately, was Dick McFadden in Campbelltown on the MOD. Dick was the MOD policeman, and his shift coincided with our shift. So he was always on duty when we were on duty. The MOD base in Campbelltown was a big thing at that time. Maybe it still is, I don't know. But it was a big stock of fuel for the Navy, for the Atlantic. And there were massive underground containers of fuel up there somewhere. And the whole hillside could be lit up. But it never ever was, other than when we were over at the shipyard across the Lothian.
Yeah. And we'd go over and we'd flash a light so that Dick knew we were there, and he'd out-trump us by flashing the whole hillside at us.
Do you remember the night we made him get his Browning out?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. We went down mob-handed. Normally two of us would turn up, but that time we stuck you in the back of the van. So that basically Dick didn't know you were there. Tam and I went in to chat to him, have a cup of tea, and you then proceeded a sequence of wind-ups so that we could force him to open up his gun cabinet and get the gun out.
He nearly called our bluff as well, Ruth, because they were trying to get him to get the gun out while I was throwing stones at the windows and opening his car door and things like that. And rather than get the gun out, he decided to phone Fast Lane for backup. So we nearly had a major incident in our hands if he'd got to phone Fast Lane. We'd have had who knows who would have descended on us then. All good fun. Ian, there was one serious thing that I meant to bring up with you, because you're not that long retired, 10 years, I think. And it was the mental health issues that I touched on in the book for police officers and all the emergency services. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on whether we've moved forward, because in our day, in the 70s and 80s, there was nothing there for the lads, was there?
No, there wasn't. I mean, you got taken aside and given a dram, and that was about it. One of the other things you touch on in the book, I think, that brought it home to me quite early, was your first sudden death, which was Graham.
Yeah.
Now, I'd worked with Graham. I was in digs at the farm with his in-laws, and so knew him quite well. And then, as you know, very, very suddenly was taken from us. And it was such a shock to everyone at the time. And it was that shock, having not known him as well, you might have recognised it more, how the ripples moved out around the station. We certainly have moved on. I mean, I was unfortunate enough to be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress with 26 years service. And at the time, there was counselling made available. And the problem was very quickly resolved, in fairness to the force. Because what they told me was it was nothing at all to do with the one incident that triggered it, although that was a factor. It was 26 years of incidents. And that's what folk don't realise, is the cumulative effect.
Yes.
Going to death. Very often, of course, the worst part is not the actual death or what you have to deal with. It's dealing with the family and the sheer distress that you cannot help empathising with. And it's impossible not to take that on board. And it does build a level of pressure all the time.
I had a very poignant one, and it's in the book. So if you want to hear the full story, you'll need to buy the book. But it was the most innocuous sudden death that you could ever imagine. And I really mean that. By this time, I had maybe 12, 14 years service, and I'd been in this crime squad. So I had dealt, along with you and others, Ian, every kind of death that you could imagine. And yet finding an old man in his chair, I mean an old man in his late 70s or 80s, who had passed away peacefully watching television with a cup of tea next to him. And it haunted me for months thereafter. So it's exactly what you say, that it's not one incident, it's an accumulation of events. And I just hope that now that the police have got some helpline or something that people can phone confidentially or be made to go to annually or whatever it might entail, just to help them deal with these things.
I was unfortunate at the opposite end of the scale to you. It was a child in my case that triggered it all. And it is, I mean, and that's what folk don't get is the sheer scale of what the police have to deal with. And it's more so now. I do feel very much for the youngsters now that don't have that wealth of experience to sort of take them away and explain to them that it's all right to not feel all right.
Yeah. Thank you again, and I hope can Fiona hear me?
No, she can't. She stays away from the computer as much as possible. She's a bit of a technophobe that way.
Thank her for me anyway, because she's the unspoken force behind you that got me through those 2 years as well.
There was quite a few meals, I believe, involved in that process.
I just hope you've not got a tick list going, that's all.
Yeah, that's it, right. Listen,
Thank
all
you.
the best. I've enjoyed the book. Haven't quite got through it, but it's looking good so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See you. And just on that note, for the people who are watching in the webinar, they'll get a follow-up email tomorrow, and for people on Facebook, there will be a link in the description just to some mental health websites and things like that if you're struggling or if you need support. And now, Simon, will we move on to our next guest?
Yeah.
The amazing Melinda Colt, author of the Irish Garda series. And also we're going to announce the winner of our giveaway at the end. So hi, Melinda.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Congratulations. Welcome to the world of the published authors. At last. I hope you enjoy it.
Do I get to know all the secrets now, Melinda? Do I?
Well, I told you a lot of them already. But yeah, it's only your first book, so it will get less exciting in time. But anyway, I'm going to keep you busy because for those of you who don't know, you're my crime consultant.
Yeah.
So that means that you get to answer to all of my civilian dumb questions about how to solve a murder crime. Yeah, remember how we met in this Facebook group?
Now, wait a minute. You just said there to solve these murder crimes. I didn't say anything about solving them. I know how to turn up and how to do things at the locus and all that kind of stuff, but nobody said anything about actually solving them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's my job as an author. But you helped me a lot with the procedure part of things. And I was just remembering how we met. For Ruth, who doesn't know the story, Simon and I met on the internet. Yes, I know this is a modern day a little Red Riding Hood fairy tale, but actually ours was a fortunate encounter because we were part of a Facebook group called Cops and Writers. Yeah. And I asked some dumb question like, how do you solve a murder? And, you know, people go to the police academy for years how to learn how to solve a murder. So no one actually replied to me other than Simon, who was brave enough to tackle my question. And bit by bit, he started to explain to me the procedures, all the things that, first of all, he wanted to determine what I wanted to know, because this is such a complex question that it's really hard to, almost impossible to answer. As he said, I could write a book about it.
Well, I can actually announce tonight that my second book is a compilation of the emails that I sent to Melinda.
I was just about to say that. I think you wrote a book. If I start to gather all the emails, and I have to confess that he also sent me a few chapters of his book. And I was so impressed because he's such a wonderful storyteller. Only he can talk about death and crime and murder with humor. So that's a talent that it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Melinda. Melinda, I have a question for you.
Tell me.
The hero or the centerpiece of your Garda series, your trilogy series, is DCI Daly. Now tell me, is he modeled on me?
No, actually, I have a different hero, main character for each book in the series. See, you haven't read them. I caught you. You haven't read them.
I only read the first one.
No, Yes, well, the first one features D.I. O'Sullivan, who has to solve a cybercrime case. Well, we were talking about meeting on the internet and all that. He has to solve a very complicated cybercrime case.
Yes.
So
right up my street.
I'm sorry?
Right up my street.
Exactly. Thankfully, technology is, I don't know, a huge part of our lives these days. And it's an important part of solving crimes and of committing crimes. And I'm grateful that the police actually managed to keep up with the criminals and to also use this technology, because I write a lot about cybercrime, and on my research, I read a lot of horrifying stuff that goes on the internet. Actually, the premise of Their Game, my book, is quite unbelievable. I didn't think these things actually happen until I started to do research and saw what teenagers today are capable of doing on the internet.
Yes.
So,
Melinda, just while you're on, you're a USA best-selling author, and I've seen some of your work and some of the stuff that you do. It's absolutely outstanding. What would you say, and a theme of what I've discovered in the process of doing the 10%, is that just about everyone has got ideas, and some of them have started writing and stopped, and nearly everyone, certainly everyone has got a story to tell, but very, very few cross the line to doing something about it. What would you say to anyone that's thinking about writing, about putting down even a memoir or some fictional or some fantasy or whatever's in their head?
Well, first of all, I would say to learn to write. I mean, first read some books about writing. Don't do what Melinda did. I started writing without having any idea how to do it. I've been reading since I was 4 years old, and I read a lot, thousands of books. But reading is not enough to be able to write a book. So if you want to write a book, start reading books about writing. You know how to craft a story. You have to know the bare minimum, at least, how to structure it. You need to learn about the POVs, points of view, and stuff like that. And of course, if you have a story to tell, you can tell it, because as a friend of mine says, who's a very successful author, there has never been a better time to be an author. And you don't necessarily need a publishing house in our days. You can also be an indie author, which is, it's for everyone. But
Well, we don't go there because we just go to Ringwood. Why would we bypass?
Of course not. But like I said, to write a quality story, you have to do some research first. Learn how to write. And after that, go to the next steps.
Good, Melinda. Melinda, you very kindly put up a prize for us for the launch of the 10% a few months ago. And it was a share and like and comment on the 10% webpage. And there was, I don't know how many participants, there was more than we could count participants that did that. And thank you to everyone who did participate. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope you'll enjoy it.
The prize that Melinda has put up is her new first book in the series, the Lagarda series. And
Their Game. I hope you can see it. It's an ebook copy.
The Their Game.
I don't have paperback copies yet. They're only available at Amazon, but I will be holding a giveaway with that. So
okay, and also a voucher for Amazon to the same person. And I think Ruth has done the randomizer to find out who the winner is. Have you got it, Melinda? Have you got it, Melinda? Have you got the winner?
I've got the winner.
No, surprise to me too.
So I have the winner here. I just put everyone's name who entered over Facebook and Twitter into a random generator. And good luck to everyone who won. I am proud to announce that the winner is Maxine Hawthorne. So congratulations, Maxine. We'll be in touch shortly.
Congratulations, Maxine. I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, I'll be waiting a review from you. Thank you.
Of course.
I'm sure you'll love the book.
Thanks.
And also your £10 Amazon voucher, put it to good use.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Belinda, thank you very much. I think you've got something special planned for Christmas as well, haven't you? Belinda,
I'm sorry?
you've got something special planned for Christmas?
Oh, yes. Actually, it's a novella, an introductory novella to my Irish Garda series.
Okay.
It's called Saving Maddie. And actually, the surprise that I have for you tonight is that I mentioned the 10% in this book. The heroine is a detective, a female detective from the Irish Garda. And at some point, she's working a human trafficking case. She saves a few children that are a victim of human trafficking, and she mentions that she's read a book called The 10% by Simon Mclean, and that she is so proud to be part of that 10%.
Wow.
The novella is available exclusively in a box set by Chill Out Books. It's called Dear Santa, A Christmas Wish. And like I said, it's an introductory novella to the Irish Garda series. We hope to hit the USA Today bestselling authors list this year again. So the box set is...
You get one customer anyway, Melinda. That's for sure.
Thank you so much. You get 18 stories for only 99 cents, so you have a bargain.
Fantastic. Melinda, thank you for coming on from Romania for us tonight. That was brilliant. Thanks for all your help over the last few months, and I look forward to consulting.
Well, I'm going to keep you busy. Congratulations again, and I look forward to the next book and to the next book launch.
Thank you, Melinda.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. That was nice, Ruth.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely be grabbing myself one of those box sets for the Christmas holidays. All right, Simon, so you're going to introduce our next guest, aren't you? Robert Beedham, very accomplished individual.
Yes, I am. Now, the problem I've got with Robert is that if I tried to allude to the awards and the prizes and all the rest of it that you can find on the internet about Robert, that would be the end of the evening by far. We'd be here all night, in fact. Suffice to say that Robert's an award-winning screenwriter, producer, novelist. I found out today, Robert, that you've acted in a few of these as well. He's written and co-produced numerous documentaries. He's won a New York Television Award, World's Best Writer, filmmaker, author. It just goes on. And I suppose most pertinently, recently a lot of people will have seen the Appeal Court programme on BBC, The End of the Line. And very recently, the Dark Shadow of Murder. It was about the sad murder in Queen's Park in Glasgow. And this Sunday, the Forensic Squad is coming back on again on BBC as part of a series. So Robert, without further introduction, welcome aboard tonight.
Thank you for that, Simon. That was a very glowing introduction. Thank you.
Good. Robert, I want to pick your brains tonight because I'm very conscious that there's a few authors on here, not just rookie first-time authors like myself, but there's a few very established authors like you've just heard, a USA best-selling author there.
Yeah, wow.
And it would be remiss of me to have you on and not pick your brains on behalf of all of these people, because every author thinks that their work and thinks it could go further and things could be done with it. There's a lot of publishers on tonight as well, certainly Ringwood here, but there were other people listening in, and anyone that intends to write a book that they all have inside of us. And although it's a completely your field, I thought you could allude to how it gets picked up, how our work gets picked up, because most of us feel that it's a passive thing, that you write your book, you put it out there and publish it, people buy it or don't, and you hope that somebody somewhere in an office or wherever gets wind of it and thinks, oh, that would make a good documentary or that would make a good film or whatever.
Yeah.
How do these things actually come about? Could we be more proactive?
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. They do say that when you've written your book, then the work starts. It starts in two ways. First of all, you've got to get critical mass. So you've got to get reviews. You've got to try and get the awards. You've got to try and get the sales. And hopefully, if the book's good enough, you should achieve that. Because then that will grab attention and grab awareness. Lots of books now are written in 3 acts, the exact same way that a screenplay is written. And because I always read books in the genre that I'm currently writing about, I've noticed that that's happening a lot. So you see things that happen at, 3%, 10%, 25%, because that's how films are written in 3 acts. So that's become very commonplace, and I would recommend that authors do that, because it means that when producers and other companies that can get your book to screen, it helps them think through the 3-act process. So it's a useful tool for to think about.
Can you tell me, Robert? Because mine's is in 4 parts.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's valid too. But what will happen with your book, Simon, is that somebody will pick that up and then write it in 3 acts. Producers are so used to seeing the 3-act structure. People say it's dead. It's not. It will always be alive. It was first created by the Greeks and for theatre. And the 3 acts were, of course, comfort breaks. Anyway, I digress. So there's actually companies that will take your book and adapt it for the screen and sell it to producers for you. They are out there. These companies exist. So all you got to do is Google them. And that's companies like Voyage Media in the USA. And they'll actually read your book and then give you marketing tips on it. It will cost you, them in particular, because I've worked with them. They're quite expensive, but they're very good. The other way is to look at producers that have made films in the same genre as your book. And then you don't expect them to read the book. They won't, but they'll read a screenplay from the book. So what you need to get done very quickly is a screenplay. You could do it yourself. You could read, this is one of the 30 books that I've got on adapting and writing screenplays. I have to say it's a super slog. It's taken me 25 years, or 20 years rather, to be an overnight success. So with a screenplay, it's a real, it's a marathon. So expect a lot. I mean, the famous stories of producers taking forever to get films made. Oliver Stone took 10 years to get Tom Cruise in a film. That's very common. So you can either write the script yourself or find somebody to write it for you. That person is liable to have industry contacts. So that's what I would personally recommend.
Okay, you've done 2 of your own books. You've made them into screenplays, is that right?
Yeah. So this is my first book, and I've adapted that for the screen. I've also begun to adapt that for the stage as well.
Wow, and give us a wee insight into how you go about that. What's the difference between, like, my book that's just out today, or how would that look when it became fit for screen as a screenplay?
Okay, well, that's a really good question, Simon, because everybody that's got a favourite book then goes and watches the film always says, yeah, that's great, but it's nothing like the book.
Yeah.
So, and that's a great little exercise for you, is that take a book that's been adapted for the screen and watch the film, try and get a copy of the screenplay, and again, you can get them online, and then see how different they are. You'll find they're radically different.
Yes.
A lot of that is a structural thing, and a lot of that is because films move along at a cracking pace.
Yeah.
Whereas books don't.
I used to always say to people, go and see the film first, because the book will just fill in all the gaps. When you read it, you'll still enjoy the book. Whereas if you've read the book and then go and see the film, you've got an expectation, and most of it's not there anymore.
You do. And I mean, and they're very different art forms.
Yes.
People think they're the same, but they're not.
Yeah. I think the biggest example I've got of something like that was when, and actually it was on earlier on, Stan. I stayed at Stan's house once when I was about 15 or 16 or something. And I have to read at night. Before I go to sleep, I always read something. And I was in his house and I couldn't find a book anywhere. And I found this book in the kitchen and I went to bed and it said on the back, you'll start this book at sundown and you'll put it down again at sunrise. And I took that with the biggest pinch of salt because I'd seen the film. So I opened the book and started reading it and I was up all night. And the book was called Jaws.
Brilliant.
It was the most fantastic book. It was so gripping. It just had you the whole way through. And I'd already seen the film, but it was brilliant. Yeah. So well written. It was tremendous.
Yes, indeed. Benchley, Peter Benchley.
Yeah, fantastic. Robert, I know you're over in Rossi now, but what are you working on right now? What is the big You've always got 3 or 4 projects on the go at any one time.
I mean, I'm always working on book projects and I'm always working on film projects. So in film, we're working on a whole number of things, from the Lockerbie appeal kicking off next month. We're coming up for air from Crime with a modern retelling of Cinderella, can you believe? We're back in again on Crime with a whole slew of projects. I'm rewriting my screenplay on my Imagine book, which is my second book. I've just completely rethought that after walking along the beach here one day. It's a film set on an island, and now that I live on one, the take has become completely different. So yeah, lots happening.
The Cal Mac feature in it then, I take it.
Not in my second book, no. It's a kind of quasi fantasy type thing.
Robert, I always love speaking to you, and because whenever I think I'm busy, I just speak to you and I realise that I'm actually idle.
I always laugh when I say I take 2 days off a year, Christmas Day and New Year's Day, and but I've not worked for 20 years because it's my passion. So and they pay me for it. Fantastic.
And isn't that great when you can combine your passion with an income?
I'm very lucky.
Robert, thanks very much for joining us tonight. I could
you
talk
too,
to you all
Simon.
night about this stuff. And
all the best with the book.
Thanks very much.
Very well. And thanks for the invitation to you and Ruth.
Not at all. Thanks, Robert.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Hi, Ruth.
Fascinating. Maybe that'll be the next step for the 10% in the next few years. On the big screen. Can imagine George Clooney playing you.
Is that who you've got in mind? I think we should run a competition and see who people think would get to play me. So I've got my own thoughts on that.
All right, so now we're finally going to find out what happened in the end of the man trap.
Right.
And Drayden left his own bit of cliffhanger. So we just take it away when you're ready.
Well, if you remember where we had got, we'd made a fateful rookie mistake that night, trying to stay in the pub until closing time and suss out, pace ourselves. You see, we had assumed that the pub would close at 11 on a midweek night. A reasonable assumption with hindsight, but as we all know, assumptions often make you an ass. About 10 to 11, we went up to the bar and bought a few drinks, intending that they would keep us inside until everybody had left or was leaving. But as 11 o'clock came and went, there was no last order shouted. The place just got busier. We quickly established that closing time was 1 in the morning. We weren't prepared for that, and our pacing was way out. Actually, we were pissed, well pissed. The result of this was that we fell out over a game of pool. In our defence, neither of us had anything to eat, and we had taken on board a good few gallons of beer by this time. We ended up arguing heatedly, resorting to fisticuffs at one point, and although no blows were actually landed as far as we could establish, we were too drunk to fight effectively, of course, but we were loud, and we had to be split up and held back, and this caused quite a commotion apparently. I don't remember much about it. I do remember realising what had happened the next day and thinking we might have blown the whole operation by getting ourselves barred from the man trap. We presented ourselves at the pub that Tuesday, prepared to grovel our way in, and luckily the manager accepted our apologies and he let us stay. We were both worth a lot of money to the man trap, of course. We could not have ingratiated ourselves any better to the clientele had we planned the whole thing. Everybody knew us and wanted to take the piss out of us about our carry-on. We were accepted as characters and good guys and regarded as a fixture round the pool table for that week. We had some food on the Tuesday and had our wits about us all night. And over the course of the week, we scored every kind of illicit substance known to man. We also knew that on Friday night there would be a substantial amount available for sales through all of the usual outlets. Tam and I were worried about the bust that was going to go down in the pub on the Friday night. The gaffers wanted us in there when it went down in order to ensure that all of the main culprits were hoovered up and that we were prepared for the looks of disappointment and letdown when these guys realised that we were actually police officers. We didn't have to worry. The overriding vibe and comments that were made about Tam and I were absolute shock and horror that the police would actually employ reprobates like us. To me, this showed that I was a real undercover cop. I had managed to be totally convincing as a Ned, a drunk, and a druggie in the biggest den in Oban, maybe Argyll, or even the world for all I knew at that time. Some might say I was a natural. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you, Simon. That was brilliant. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for you to go undercover in the pub. Being as acceptable as you are. What a terrible job. All right, so now that the second reading is done, it's time for our Q&A session. So all our viewers, if you have any questions for Simon, this is the time to pop them in the Q&A box, or just comment on the Facebook stream if that's how you're watching. So let me have a look. We have our first question, Simon, from Shan McCluskey. She says, Simon, I lived in Rothesay, working at a particularly large sandstone house, and it was great to read your experiences of the place and the people. What's your favourite story from your time there?
In Rothesay?
Yes.
That ferry taking me off. I'm only joking. It's very difficult because my daughter was born in Rothesay. My middle daughter, Tracy Ann, was born while I lived and worked in Rothesay. So that was the obvious highlight that I have to mention in case she's listening. But I think my favourite story, the stories would take a while because everything has to be set in context in Rothesay, especially because it was such a special place. But there's lots of stories in the book, of course. But I think the lasting memory for me in Rothesay was the people that I met and still have friends over there. It really is and was a wonderful place to work. I'm struggling to think of one story that I can elongate into a few sentences because they were so profound. Probably the person that I should mention mostly was the Procurator Fiscal was Caroline McNaughton. And anyone who lived or worked in Rothesay in the 80s would know Caroline because she was absolute character. She wore wigs, big wigs and hats. And of course, the sheriff was Irvin Smith. And there have been books written, and I could write a book about the comedy we had in that sheriff court with Irvin Smith. But you could never laugh because you would end up in a police cell. So it was really, really difficult in there. But the stories about him are absolute legend. Like the lawyer would say, the client had been found guilty and the lawyer would say, could we pay it up, Your Honour? Could we pay it weekly? And Irvin Smith would say, yes, how much are you thinking? And he would say, £2 a week. And Irvin would lower his spectacles onto his nose and look over them and say, do you think this is the Little Woods catalogue you're dealing with here? It was just absolutely fantastic. Thanks for that question. And you've triggered so many good memories of Rothesay for me. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Shan. Now we've got a question from Facebook, and I believe this might be Simon Mclean Jr. Am I right in thinking that?
Oh, no. I thought he was in his bed.
The doppelganger. He asks, would you still wish those guys in the pub to be busted now? Would you still wish those guys in the pub that you busted? Sorry, I'm just working out the spelling mistake in the comment. Sorry, Simon.
I think I get the idea.
Yeah. Would you still bust those guys in the pub? even though
Yes.
it has been your job for a good while. One could argue that alcohol is almost more deadly than anything else on sale, which, good point.
So the answer is yes, son. Now get to your bed. Thank you. The truth is, yes, I would, because, well, A, I was 22 at the time. I didn't know any better. He wasn't even born or thought about it at that time. But the answer is still yes, because the more knowledge that the police had about what was going on in that scene. And in those days, drugs could still have been curtailed to a large degree if the government had seen the way forward rather than declare the war on drugs. In the man trap, I don't think anyone ended up in prison from the man trap. But what it did was fire a warning shot across the bows of all the people in Oban. Probably the man trap was the central point at that time. Drugs were much more centralised at that time. Everybody probably remembers having a hippie in their year at school, and he was the go-to guy if you wanted a wee bit of blow or a wee bit of this or that. This is before the proliferation. And my point really is that we still could have done something about that proliferation. We still could have done something about the heroin problem that was about to descend on Scotland, the UK and the world at that time if we had dealt with it differently. But we had to have the information, we needed to have the contacts, we needed to know what was happening in order to do that. So yes, I would still do it, but not as a naive young 22-year-old who was really just having a carry on, let's be honest. We drank ourselves stupid for 4 days and then told the guys that were coming in who to arrest. It wasn't exactly the operation of the century. I think what Simon's getting at, though, is that I do believe that alcohol is a much more pervasive influence now. And if we had the controls that we have over alcohol, if we put them in place over drugs and illicit drugs, then we would be able to control the marketplace, which is what it's all about for me. Our prisons are full of low-level addicts who are as much a victim of the drugs war as anyone is in this country or any country. So they're not the target. They're not the people that should be in prison. And we wouldn't have a need to put them in prison if we had regulated the thing properly. Surely the 20s and the gangsters in America have taught us that it doesn't work. This illegal us and them. There's much more we could be doing about it. And I was on a podcast recently, Ruth, as you know, you lined it up for me with Sean Atway down in Liverpool, and he's very much an advocate of this legalisation. It's something that I intend getting involved with as we move forward.
Yeah, he was a drug dealer himself, I believe, who was in prison for it and then released, and now he's an advocate for reforming things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people would agree that the best way forward isn't just throwing addicts in jail who need help, with their addiction.
And I think, having spent the best part of my police career chasing drug dealers and all that entails, it's a valid point of view that we can't keep going the way we're going. We can't keep doing what we're doing because it's not working. And that's the definition of insanity as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So I must thank my son for that very lucid question. Now get to your bed.
We've got a lot of other questions coming in as well. So we'll start off with Chloe Murphy, who asks, it sounds like you have a lot of wild stories to tell. Did you keep a journal or a diary of these as you were working?
No, I didn't. I didn't keep any notes whatsoever. And I had this today, somebody messaged me on Facebook asking about a particular thing in the book and whether it was a factual thing or not. And the truth is, the start of the book, when I say that it's my perspective and it's my memory of events, and it will be entirely different for other people who were involved. Ian Andrew, for example, and my brother and my sister, everybody remembers the past from their own perspective. So nothing that I put in there is from a journal or from notes that were made. It's purely from memory. And a couple of times I've phoned up people to remind me of where it was and who was involved, or I've looked up Google to find out dates and places and things like that. But everything is just off the top of my head because it's my recollection. Something like the truth.
That will be interesting once everyone's finished their books and they're calling you up like that never happened.
And as far as the wild part's concerned, I should point out that I've also got a twin brother who used to use my name, And he got me into so much trouble over the years. And if anybody wants to get in touch with him, I'll give you his details later.
I'm sure. The next question is from Stevie Whitelock, who asks, why did the police decide to send you to Campbelltown when you joined? And was there a language issue?
Stevie Whitelock knows exactly why they sent me to Campbelltown, because I had to get as far away from him as was humanly possible. I'll tell you a story about Stevie Whitelock. At Tully Allen, on our first, Stevie joined with me. He's in the picture of me at Tully Allen on that picture that you've got, Ruth. I don't know if it's handy, Katie, and Stevie's on that. But what I remember was that Tully Allen was mostly sports. I mean, about half our time was spent running around Tully Allen rather than being in it. In the swimming pool, everything was sports. And I've never been fitter than I was in my life at that time as a 20-year-old. And on the final day, we had a big run. I don't know how long, maybe 10 miles or something. And I was way ahead. I was scushing it. I was strolling it. I could have had a fag in the final half mile. And as I was coming up to the finishing line, about 50 yards to go, everyone started screaming at me. And I was wondering what was going on. I thought I'd had a problem or an accident. And what they were really shouting was for me to hurry up, because there was a guy catching up on me. And he overtook me with about 3 yards to go. And I'm glad he's come on here so I can thank him for that disappointment, Stevie, if he remembers that. What was his question? Why I get sent to Campbelltown?
Yes.
I've absolutely no idea. Actually, when I had my interview, the police asked me if I would mind leaving home. And it was obviously a trap. I now know how to set these traps. But I said cleverly, maybe. Where do you think I might end up? And they said Motherwell. And that was a blue train trip from me from Partick to Motherwell. So, of course, I relaxed and said, no problem, big man. I'm your man. The next thing I knew, I was being sent to the darkest corner of Argyll. And that's all I know, Stevie. I think Stevie Whitelock might have had something to do with it, actually.
Okay, next question. Richard, sorry for the pronunciation here, Richard, because I'm not sure. It's Richard Ritniger?
Yeah, yes.
Did you ever like anyone you arrested? Oh, I already know the answer to this.
Most of them. There was so many. Richard, I think.
Did you ever like anyone you arrested? What's that?
I don't know. It's an echo.
Had a wee bit of an echo there. That's it gone. Okay. Sorry,
that was two questions. Trust Richard. Hi, Richard. Hi, Maggie. The truth is that a lot of people that you arrested, I don't think like is the right word. I'm not sure. There was a grudging respect there, especially in the CID when I went into plain clothes and drugs world and all that. You had to form relationships in order to build information, and you had to have people that you could trust to a degree. So I'm not sure that like is the right word, but you could certainly I struck a relationship with many of these guys. And let's be honest, the guys, there was a lot of people who were on the line. Mm-hmm. Like there's a guy, Bobby Beattie in Rossi, who had a scrapyard in Rossi, and the people from Rossi who are listening will remember Bobby. And he always wore his bonnet, and he was rough and ready, and he was a businessman. But he was always, because of his trade, and he was a second-hand dealer and all that, he was always on that line. There was a lad, Magnus, that I'll talk about in a wee while when we come round to how Sandy and I met. And he had a garage in the West End of Glasgow, Magnus Maweta. Sadly, he's no longer with us. But Magnus ran a garage. And in those days, he was our best friend when the car had a bump, or we needed a car to do a job that wasn't obviously a police car. He was a supplier. He was the fleet man for Strathclyde Police at that time. And he was a rogue. But he was a friend of mine. I've got no problem saying he was a friend of mine. You just, as a police officer, what you did was make it very clear that they couldn't compromise you. Does that make sense? I don't want to know any of these things that you might be involved in, because when you get caught, and you will, don't come to me thinking it was me that shocked you or went and told someone. That was the kind of line that you had to draw to keep you out of that particular problem. Thanks, Richard. It's nice to know you're awake at this time of night. It's well past your bedtime.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Helen Houston, who asks, as a former police officer, which Scottish crime writer has got the most realistic police characters in their books?
I love Rubus. I love Rubus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think it has to be. I'm thinking off the top of my head here over the years, because there's been some, and my favourite book, although it's not strictly a crime book, was Trainspotting. I just love those books. And although Trainspotting, see, Helen wouldn't have a problem here with the language, but I struggled with Trainspotting for the first 2 or 3 chapters because of the Edinburgh vernacular. And I thought, I'm not going to get through this. This is hard work. But it's amazing how your brain trips into it, and eventually you can read it, or I could, and it was a most fascinating insight into the world of heroin and all that world that existed and still does exist. And it's interesting, Helen asking me a question, because Fiona and I will be the quiz masters tomorrow night, and I'll be getting her back by asking the questions. Thanks, Helen.
Make it about police books.
It's all about the 10% tomorrow night.
Just a few more. I think we'll be able to make it through the next 3, so there's no worries there. Lindsay Murphy, apart from Jaws, what is the best book you've ever read? Which I think you kind of touched on with Trainspotting there, but is there any others?
Oh, well, my favourite book of all time, and I still go back and read it every couple of years. I think I tried to encourage Stan to read it way back when, and he's still not read. 10% will be his first book, but The Adventures of Tom Sawyer was just it was a life-changing book for me. Don't ask me why. I referred to it in the 10% actually at one point, but it was a life-changing book for me, Tom Sawyer. I just loved the whole atmosphere of it, and Huck Finn and all the rest of it. It was just fantastic, and I still get hairs stand when I think about Injun Joe in the cave and all that stuff. So yeah, Tom Sawyer.
Well, you'll be glad to hear they're still teaching that in the schools, because I'm pretty sure in my early years of high school English we read that and studied it. So
Chris, I think you're the only person on here that can remember your high school days.
No, not that long ago yet. Okay. Nikki Pasternak asks, what was the happiest moment in your entire police career? Nice question.
Well, yeah, and it's typical of Nikki. Thanks, Nikki. Got a few bruises after today when he's kicking me at the walking football. And I should say that Nikki did the kilt walk a few weeks ago, and he did it on behalf of Cystic Fibrosis and raised a lot of money. So thanks for that, Nikki. It was brilliant.
Nikki?
Yeah. The happiest moment in the police. There's no question of that, and it's all off the top of my head. But see, every time you go into, and if the other policemen that are here listening just now, I remember recovering a stolen baby. Wow, but that was more relief than happiness. I think the happiest times is coming out of court. See, when you walk out the public part of the High Court onto the street, I think that feeling of relief and happiness knows no bounds, because the alternative is to come out the back door with handcuffs on. So every time you go and give evidence and come out the front door, you're a very, very happy person.
And one final question here. David Duddy asked, you mentioned when you read Jaws, you couldn't put it down. Without getting you too big-headed, I'm finding it difficult to put down the 10%. In fact, I can honestly say that it's quite the best $29.99 I've ever
seen. He got it cheap. He got it cheap.
That must have been the box set. Your skill in storytelling is quite intoxicating, but my question is, did the police teach you this skill for your undercover police operations, or are you an undercover kisser of the Blarney Stone?
I think he knows the answer to that. Is the latter. The police never teach. In fact, they would deny even knowing me. Certainly don't get taught any of that. But David, you would know how good a storyteller I am if one of these days you would be quiet long enough to listen to one. Again, David will be on the quiz tomorrow night. Friday night, sorry. Did I answer these questions, Ruth? Do you think I got near it? The Blarney Stone, yes, obviously. No teaching from the police about undercover work. It's just not part of it. Because it's the 10%, David. The undercover part is probably the 2 or 3% who actually go and do that. The 10% are the guys who are in the front line and want to get involved in everything and are prepared to do just about anything.
Sounds like you were quite the natural anyway at the undercover stuff, as you said.
Thank you, Ruth. I like to think so.
And just one last quick question that we've got on Facebook is, oh, 2 more now, we're still coming in. Hi Simon, what inspired you to become a police officer? And that's from Jean Gallagher.
Oh, Jean and Govan, another walking footballer. Hi Jean. I don't think inspired's the right word. Well, you decide. At school, in fact, when I left school, it was no choice about what you did when I left school at 16. I had no choice about staying on at school or leaving school. It was decided long before I was born, probably, that what people in our circumstances did was get a trade. And that was the mantra in my house. You were going to go and get a trade. And my mother got the forms from Yarrow Shipyard and a few other places. I'm not sure if she filled them in. I think she did, actually. And it wasn't a question. You start in Yarrows on Monday morning, end of story, because having a job primarily was the only thing that mattered, that was above everything else in any hierarchy. Having a job and having a trade, in her mind, would set you up for life. You would never want for work. And there's a lot of truth in that, of course. So that's how I became an apprentice electrician. And I don't know what would have become of me if I had finished my HNC in Yarrows and went on to do that in the shipyards. But I damaged my knee playing football. And through a series, it's always the same, the closing doors scenario, I ended up disenchanted, not able to do the HNC and looking for some other route when Strathclyde Police happened to be recruiting like mad because the strikes and all the rest of it of the 80s were about to come. Thatcher government was about to come in. All of that was about to kick off. Ireland was at its height in those times as well. So it was a different world entirely that was going on round about me. And the police seemed like a fantastic opportunity. And I think the answer, Jean, is the variety of it. I used to say to people like Ian Andrew and any other cops that I worked with, I think we were attracted to having that radio, and you didn't know from 1 minute to the next what was going to come over it. 1 minute you could be sitting in the van, having a fag, having a blether, or sitting in the office, or sitting having a cup of tea, and the next minute you could be in the middle of a massive Barney or a fatal road accident or anything at all, just within minutes. And that was the same. That's the same throughout every police officer's career, is that standby on the radio, you're ready at a second's notice just to switch on. So I think that's what inspired me to do it.
Yeah, no day's the same in that job. Right. We'll do one final question before we move on. So Lee Barnes is saying, we've heard about Rebus, Tom Sawyer, Jaws and Trainspotting. I wonder if you are a true crime or crime fiction junkie. If so, what other authors would you recommend for either genre?
Well, if we look behind me, it's nearly all crime. Joe Nesbo, I love Joe Nesbo. Simon Mclean, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's got a new book out. He's really good. Oh, I'd recommend that one. Baldacci, Jeffrey Deaver. Michael Connolly's probably my big favourite, because my favourite detective in the whole world, and I'm glad nobody else can speak here, because nobody's going to convince me that Harry Bosch isn't real. He's so good, and that's Michael Connolly's Harry Bosch. He's my hero detective. Again, he's referred to in the book a couple of times because he's a grinder. That's what his neighbours call him, a grinder. He's a homicide detective in LA, Hieronymus Bosch. And we even watch his series on Amazon Prime. Harry's my hero.
Right. Okay, I know I said that was the last question, but this is definitely the last question we're taking, everyone. Okay, this one won't take too long.
I don't do overtime anymore.
Kathleen Crystal asking, and this is a good question as well. The cover shows a firearm. Were you armed?
Yes. Who asked this question?
Kathleen Crystal.
Okay, that sounds familiar. Yes, I was. I did my armed firearm, AFO they call it, my training in Rothsay actually was the first time that I did it. And I never carried a gun in Rossi. What happened in those days was that there was maybe 3 or 4 AFOs in each office, certainly in the smaller offices like Campbelltown and whatnot. Andrew was an AFO. A few of us went away and got trained, and you had to go every few months and get retrained just to keep and get signed off as still being competent. Although the facilities in those days were frankly a joke, but that's what it was. But we didn't carry firearms as a matter of course. They were locked away in the office. The ammunition was locked away separately. And if they were going to be issued, there was a whole rigmarole that you had to go through. An inspector and chief inspectors and all the rest of it had to sign off because it was a big deal if you drew a firearm. And it happened occasionally, but I never had to draw in Rossi. But I dealt with the Paul Ferris incident in Rossi, but I wasn't armed. I was keeking around the corner of the close while the serious crime squad guys arrested them, but they were all armed. So yes, but when I went to Glasgow, I went straight to the serious crime squad. And again, we were armed, but not on a daily basis. Sometimes we'd be armed over a protracted period if we were dealing with a particularly difficult situation, maybe working with a special branch or something like that. But in my day, we didn't have armed officers on the streets, other than just about then. There was 1 or 2 cars roaming the streets that had permanent firearms on board. Now I believe that's, well, I know that that's much more proliferate and it's much more routine now, for obvious reasons. So yes, I did.
Great, thank you for answering that. And we'll wrap up the Q&A session there, and we'll move on because we've got 2 very special guests from the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, Susan and Daisy. Hi, Susan.
Hi there, and thank you so much for inviting Daisy and I along tonight to talk about the Cystic Fibrosis Trust and the work you're doing. So anybody who's got any questions either about anything we say or about anything in general, if you can pop them in the chat, and Ruth will kindly pick them up for it. Don't know the answer, then we'll come back to you as soon as we find out. Okay,
so I should maybe just explain, Susan, that my daughter Louise had cystic fibrosis, and she passed away in 2011, and the book is dedicated to Louise. And I like to think that, well, I know for a fact that the fact that it was going to be dedicated to her is why it got finished eventually, because that's what spurred me on to do it. So I thought it very appropriate to get a catch up with the trust and find out, because things have changed so much over the last 10 years. And I hope that you could bring us up to speed a wee bit with that.
Well, I'll try very hard, but I think the last 10 years and then the last 6 months have probably seen something completely different.
Yeah.
So my name's Susan, obviously, you can see that on the screen, and I'm the community fundraiser in Scotland. So my role is to be in Scotland and to work with our amazing supporters and volunteers and to maximise basically our fundraising activities in this area. So the Cystic Fibrosis Trust's mission really is to fight for a life unlimited by CF for everybody who has cystic fibrosis. And if you're not aware of what cystic fibrosis is, but it's a life-limiting genetic condition. So around 10,500 people in the UK have cystic fibrosis today, and around 927 of them live in Scotland. So it's a condition that you're born with. You can't catch it in later life. But a fact that I found quite startling when I joined the trust is that 1 in 25 of us carry the faulty gene, normally with not knowing that we have this gene. But if 2 carriers have the gene and they have a baby, then there's a likelihood of 1 in 4 that baby will have cystic fibrosis. So it's a very complicated disease, and it's around about 2,000 different gene mutations that can cause the disease, and it affects mainly the lungs with the buildup of mucus, and that impacts in breathing and it impacts in infections, but it also can affect the liver or CF-related diabetes, and around 85% of people with cystic fibrosis have trouble digesting their food. And it can also have fertility issues. So, no one person's experience is the same. And people with cystic fibrosis have to be very organised. They have a daily physical regime, and they also, a lot of them have to take between 40 and 60 different tablets a day. Now, I don't know about you, but I struggle to remember to take my vitamins in the morning. Be able to do something like that is truly, it's very constraining. And not only do they have to take so many different tablets, but that can also have to be done at very specific times of the day and also with specific foods. So you are organised and focused if you suffer from cystic fibrosis. Trust started in 1964, and at that point, most children were not expected to survive infancy. But with changes in medical research and in care and in the drugs, the median age now of survival is 31. And around half of the people with cystic fibrosis will live until they're 49, but that still means there's another half that won't. And we need to make sure that we are there and we're providing everything that we need to do to work so that isn't the case in the future. This summer, a lot of you may have heard the news about Campbelltown, which is a new drug therapy which has had amazing results in clinical trials. So around, what the clinical trials are telling us is there's an increase of lung capacity of around 10 to 14%, but not just that, it also affects, I'll struggle with this word, but gastrointestinal improvements and also an overall quality of life. So it is a game changer in terms of cystic fibrosis, but around 10% of people with cystic fibrosis will not be able to benefit from Campbelltown because of the type of gene mutation that they have. So we are fighting very hard for everybody to have access to the kind of drugs that they need and to continue with the research that will help provide that. As you can imagine, this has been a very challenging year, not just for people with cystic fibrosis and the Cystic Fibrosis Trust along with other charities. We've all had our own experiences of lockdown. I don't know, many of you may have had to shield for a very long time. Some people may have had a better experience, but probably just before official lockdown happened, most people with cystic fibrosis were shielding. And for them, it meant they couldn't leave their homes. So if they didn't have a garden, then they were basically confined to their own homes for 12 weeks, which is very difficult. And as you can imagine, it happened very suddenly. It caused a lot of concern and immediate problems. How were they going to get access to food, to exercise, to work? And in the first few months, the Cystic Fibrosis Helpline saw a doubling of calls, and we gave out around about 800 emergency grants. Now, if you consider the number of people with cystic fibrosis in the country, that's actually quite a large amount of grants. And while those amounts were typically small, they indicate perhaps the level of need people were in at that particular time. And those grants were for things like food, white goods, or exercise equipment, because as I said, it's really important for people with cystic fibrosis to exercise. And all of a sudden they couldn't go to a gym, they couldn't go for a walk, they couldn't go anywhere. So it was really important that we were there to help them. It also happened at a time when events like the London Marathon and other events that we had planned for Cystic Fibrosis Week, which typically happens in June, face-to-face fundraising, all of that was halted. And we were needed perhaps more than ever, but we were at a time when we were facing real financial difficulties. And it's lovely to hear that Nicky's listening in tonight, because Nicky's one of those supporters who adapted his fundraising. So while the kilt walks didn't go ahead in their traditional fashion, there was virtual kilt walks. So we have been amazed at the persistence, the perseverance and the ingenuity of all of our supporters who've continued to fundraise for us at this time, doing things like Nicky did with the virtual kilt walk, but we've also had people making masks and hanging them in a tree outside their gardens so that people can come past and make donations. So it's all distant and everything like that, because it's so important for us to be able to carry on with groundbreaking research, maintaining the registry that CF have, which helps monitor the safety of new drugs, being there with emergency grants, funeral grants, and just generally being there for the community when they need us. And we're having to adapt to that new way of working along with everybody else. And I'm sure Simon never thought that his book launch was going to be on Zoom. He never thought as fundraisers that we were going to spend our time speaking to people remotely or trying to find new ways of working, and that's exactly what we're having to do. So I hope that's helped a little bit to explain the background of the trust. Obviously, if anybody's got any questions or they would like to hear more or they would even like to get involved, then Ruth will be able to get the details and pass it on, and we would love to hear from you. And Daisy's going to talk a little bit more about her research, but also about the tribute funds that cystic fibrosis do. So she'll talk about that. So thank you so much for inviting us along. It's been a great evening. Really enjoyed hearing all the stories. And as I've got, my husband is from Glasgow, and actually a lot of the stuff you've been talking about has been very meaningful. So
thanks very much, Susan. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Sorry, Ruth, technical issue. Classic Zoom. Saying I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
That's all right. We'll get our background host, Katie.
We can hear you, Daisy. We can hear you.
Hopefully turn on your camera.
Well, can I just say, firstly, like, thanks so much for having me and Susan here. It's just an absolute pleasure to listen to. And I think I can start my video now. Yeah,
there we go.
Video, and you can see my yellow background. Thank you so much, Katie. So as Susan said, my name is Daisy, and I am the Memory Officer at the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. So I work with and for the bereaved CF community. And I want to talk a bit about our research that we're doing, our up-to-date research, because it's changed drastically, and also about Louise Mclean's tribute fund, and about what a tribute fund is as well. So firstly, our research. So cystic fibrosis affects the whole body, but in particular the lungs. And people with cystic fibrosis are more susceptible to contract lung infections. So we are funding research into the most dangerous and common CF infections, so we can develop better treatment, but also earlier detection. Another area of research that we're funding, as I said, and Susan said, it affects the whole body. So I'm going to list now a lot of our body parts. So our lungs, liver, pancreas, gut, bones, and as I said, long-term lung infections. And people with cystic fibrosis can develop cystic fibrosis-related diabetes, gastrointestinal cancers and other symptoms, joint pain, diarrhea, bloating, an increased burden of care, and sadly, a reduced quality of life as well. So we are funding research into all of those areas, and to how to treat them better and how to detect them faster. And finally, our other area of research is tackling the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis is caused by having the two mutated CF genes. And so we look at how we can actually solve that problem. So that could be gene therapy or fixing the protein that makes it makes the error. Now I just want to talk a bit about Louise's tribute fund. So Ruth, if you wouldn't mind sharing the screen, and Simon has kindly said that it's okay to share Louise's tribute fund. So this is Louise Mclean's tribute fund, and a tribute fund is a place to remember and share the life and the story of someone who is no longer with us but will never be forgotten. And a tribute fund can be a wonderful and healing place because your journey in remembering and celebrating your loved one's life can be shared with all your friends and family. And given the current social distancing issues and restrictions, this place being online is more important than ever because memories are shared, and it all can be shared online as well with everyone. So as you can see from Louise's tribute fund, we have that beautiful picture of her smiling. And if you can just scroll down, please, Ruth. We can see that there are GIFs that can be added, and there are also more photos and more photos of Louise and her loved ones. And this can be shared with everyone. And her thoughts as well about Louise and memories of their life with Louise. And on the right-hand side, I think you can see all the activity. Yeah, you can see all the activity. So a picture was added, a thought was added, and sometimes there's names of people who have added things. And that's just a really nice way of seeing what's going on and who's remembering Louise. And you can add kind donations as well onto the tribute fund to the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, and that's an innovative way to fundraise as well. And Simon has kindly added his book launch onto the event, onto the fundraising. So yeah, if you can click the fundraising, please, Louise. Ruth. And you can see Simon's book launch there. And so far, £152.50 has been raised in memory of Louise. And this way of displaying the donations, you can really clearly see what has been dedicated and donated in memory of Louise. And you can see all the donations. And as Susan said, offline donations can also be added, including like Nikki's Kilt Walk, and we've had other Kilt Walk donations on the fund as well. So it's just a wonderful way to remember. And if you'd like to make a donation to Louise's Tribute Fund and to Simon's book launch, I think Ruth is going to share the link with everyone, maybe a follow-up email. And if you have any questions about in-memory giving or anything else, please don't hesitate to contact me or Susan. And I think Ruth is going to share our details.
Yep, on the follow-up email and also in the description of the Facebook live stream, we'll have links to the Cystic Fibrosis Trust website where you can find out more about their work and the research and things like that. And we'll also have the link to Louise's much loved page where you can make a donation if you like. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
And Susan.
Fantastic.
Well, that was brilliant. That was really interesting, and it's great to hear about all the research being done and things. It's just a charity that helps in so many different ways, not just supporting the families and the people who have cystic fibrosis, but also, like they said, funding research and paying for emergency funds and things, as you'll know, Simon.
Yeah, Ruth, Louise was born in 1988 and she was diagnosed after 6 months, which in itself is a story because we all know that early diagnosis in just about every illness or disease is vital. So 6 months is a nonsense. The truth is that it costs 50 pence to do an ankle test, a blood test at birth that screens for all sorts of diseases and problems that could be helped at that early stage. But it just wasn't there in those days. And when Louise was about 5, the big breakthrough came and we discovered the gene. And we all thought that a cure was round the corner. But that's 18, 20 years ago. And we're still getting better treatments, and the prognosis has become so much better because we were told that Louise would live till she was 5, and she lived until she was 23. And that helps deal with her passing because she got those bonus years. But it just shows how much Cystic Fibrosis Trust and the research part of it has come on over the years. It's absolutely astounding. And that's only cystic fibrosis. Every charity out there struggling just now. So whatever's close to your heart, make sure that you help in whatever way you can just now.
They're so important, definitely. And I'm sure things will just keep getting better from here, not only research into cystic fibrosis, but other conditions. You know, every day new discoveries are being made. So it's important to support them when you can. Yeah.
Now, have we got our leader? Have we got him online?
Well, I have some disappointing news about Sandy, who at the moment is in Spain. The poor guy. Spain, but his Wi-Fi connection is really dodgy, and he's just not being able to connect and perform his speech as he wished to, which is very sad because he did have a whole 10-minute speech prepared that would have been great to listen to. But he just asked to let me tell everyone that his whole speech can be condensed into one sentence. Buy this wonderful book. You'll be entertained, amused, educated, and you will not regret buying it, which I can second.
Ruth, can I just say a thing about Sandy's internet connection? Two things really. He told me earlier today that as the sun goes down and it gets dark in Spain, the internet connection gets worse and worse. Now, he told me it's got nothing to do with the consumption of red wine, but I refuse to believe that. The second thing is that when I heard they had written an 11-minute speech, it was me that cut the internet connection. I think I should just say a word there about the 10% because it wouldn't have happened other than through Sandy, obviously, who's the CEO of Ringwood Publishing, which is a fantastic publishing house based here in Glasgow, and gives it specialises in giving an opportunity to first-time Scottish authors. And that's very, very important in this day and age, because there's limited opportunities for that. But Ringwood are a real champion of Scottish authors, especially first time. But what happened was that I mentioned Magnus Maweta earlier, who had a garage in the West End of Glasgow that most police officers, certainly the 10% of us, frequented very often for reasons that will remain confidential. But Magnus got in tow with Ringwood probably 5 years ago now, and Ringwood wanted Magnus to write his memoir, and they were in the process of doing that when Magnus sadly took ill and eventually passed away before the book could be completed. And he had asked me to do the foreword to that book. So when Sandy Jameson of Ringwood was stuck in this dilemma of having a book half to 2/3 done, he contacted me. We met for a coffee. He says we met for beers, but we actually met for a coffee. Certainly I was drinking coffee and down in Thornwood, and that was the first time we had met. But we hit it off, and I told him some stories like I always do about the police, him being ex-social work and all that. I couldn't resist but to have a dig at him. And at the end of the conversation, he said, "Why don't you write some of these stories down?" Now, up until then, Jean Gallagher earlier asked me what the inspiration was. For years, people have been saying to me, like they probably say to lots of other people, "You should write that down, big man, you should write that down. Why don't you write a book?" And they don't really mean it, but, but I took them to heart. When Sandy encouraged me to write a few chapters, I did that, sent them to him, and he was just, Sandy, he just said, "Write some more." And I asked him about structure, and I asked him about the beginning, the middle, the end, a plot, all this stuff. And he just said, just write what's in your head and put it down on paper. Everything else will fall in place. And he was absolutely right. But the truth is that I procrastinated over it for 3.5 years. That's the truth of the matter. And I had it maybe half to 2/3 done, but really didn't have it all pieced together until lockdown. So it's one of the good things. Apparently there were 600 books launched in September as a result of lockdown. And
I think you were the only one that got the writing bug during that.
Yeah, the 10% is one of them. So if we get another lockdown, I'm sorry, there might be a follow-up to it.
Don't apologise, I'm sure people will be looking forward to it.
That's how it came to be, and I can only thank Sandy for his encouragement throughout that process. And I thought once I'd written the book, that was the end of it, and we would just move forward. Writing it was the easy bit. Since then, the proofreading and the editing and waiting for the printer, and even now waiting for Amazon to put it up on their site. But we can see light at the end of the tunnel now, and I'm very proud of it and happy that people are enjoying it. And again, the main thing is the people I've got in touch with again after all these years. That's the main bonus, is old friends and old colleagues reconnecting in some of the stories. Yeah. And the only person that I really do need to thank most of all, I suppose, two of you. One of you virtually and the other one for real is you, Ruth, for your patience with me with this IT stuff. Because just about anything I've shared anywhere on social media, you've had to do it for me. Even getting onto the Zoom call tonight required a few lessons. So I can only thank you sincerely, Ruth. You've done a fantastic job, absolutely fantastic. Even when Sandy decided to bugger off to Spain and leave you to it, you've done him proud. Thank you very much for all your help. And the last person is sitting next to me, the unsung hero, but she's my director, my fashion guru, even makeup artist tonight, and that's Fiona. Thanks very much, Fiona. I couldn't have done it without her.
Well done, well done. Really proud of them.
All the coffees. So unless you've got anything else to say, Ruth?
No, just to thank you, Simon, and also Sandy for taking me on at Ringwood. Not only do they give brilliant opportunities to writers and Scottish writers, but also to young people like myself who are wanting to get experience in publishing. And you couldn't have been a better author to work with. I think it's been a bit of a ride, but I've enjoyed every minute, and it's a brilliant book.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you.
I'll let you finish things up.
Yeah, we're going to finish off, I think, appropriately after all that. Thanks to all the guests that have come on tonight. Hi, Fiona, Andrew. I can see you. I can see you. I knew you couldn't leave them alone for that long. I'm going to finish off as the dedication that's in the book for my daughter, my late daughter, Louise, which I think is appropriate. And before I do that, my last words are to thank all my guests tonight who've been absolutely brilliant, as I knew they would be. And all the people that have been on, if there's anybody out there, I know there's been 2 or 3 because of the questions anyway, Ruth, but thank you for listening in, and thanks to everyone, all your pals, Ruth, behind the scenes that made it possible. Yeah. So it's just a wee thing about Louise that I wrote at the start of the book, because she did inspire the book, there's no question of that. Often, when I know you're near, my heart skips a beat, just as always. And sometimes, without warning, you make me smile all over. Lately, when I think you can hear, I tell you my thoughts, just like you'd want me to. And listen, can you hear me? Such are the mystic ways of time. Your memory sustains me. Your image makes me smile. The echo of our laughter will forever fill my heart. For my wonderful, beautiful, brave, and inspirational daughter, Louise Jane Mclean. I miss you so much.
Well, thank you, Simon. That was absolutely beautiful. And thank you for sharing that with us. I know that I never met Louise, but I'm around the same ages as her, and I can imagine if she had a dad like you, she would be extremely proud of everything you've done and of the 10%. And yeah. Fine. You've got to turn your mic on.
Thanks, Ruth. Good night.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.